Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon. And we have another slightly experimental episode. We have Rory Jacobs from the Radical English Gentleman podcast. We did an interview in December and people loved it. I couldn't believe it. I just called it Nick Interviewed by a Zoomer. Everyone loved it. It got actually more audio downloads than we normally get. It was just me banging on about my life. So I was like, okay, let's do another one. This is going to be a bit different. We're going to do predictions for 2024 with Rory. And we get back to normal conventional guest episodes soon. I've got some of those in the pipeline, but we're just doing a different kind of episode here. Rory, how was your Christmas and New Year?
Well, thanks
Is
for
it too
asking.
late to ask that? Is it too late to ask that now? It's like the
Not
19th or something, isn't it?
yeah, I would say it is. No, it was
Okay.
amazing covered on the show, and thanks to your audience as well for everybody who came over. It was crazy to see that. And it was a really good episode. Really enjoyed it.
So you got people coming across to the Radical English Gentleman from The Current Thing.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it because I saw my numbers the day after, and I was like, bloody hell, that is incredible. Yeah,
Power of Nick Dixon.
yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah, you're welcome. It's really weird. My podcast, I seem to be incredibly esoteric and just have all sorts of topics, and people will still, our amazing audience will still tune in. We talk about Christianity, mental health, self-improvement, comedy, politics, just everything now. And so I'm just going to keep doing that because everyone's like, oh, you've got to have one topic. I don't know who says that, but they go, oh, you've got to have one topic. But actually, like Joe Rogan had the biggest podcast in the world. I might have said this before, talking about comedy, MMA, politics. These things have nothing in common, really, especially like MMA just randomly with comedians. What's that about? So I'm just doing what I think is interesting and, seeing how it goes. And I don't want to have massive, it's kind of tiresome to keep trying to book guests, but we will. I've got some really good guests coming up. But this is and Rory's a good guest as well in his own right. But Rory, I called it Nick Interviewed by a Zoomer last time. I wanted to ask you just quickly, why are Zoomers so useless? Like, I keep seeing these articles, Zoomers get menu anxiety choosing a restaurant, or, Zoomers can't date, or it's always like Zoomers can't handle 9 to 5 jobs. Like, is it just the media, or are Zoomers just useless?
No, I mean, I would completely agree with you. I hate my generation probably more than anyone. Like I think that the worst generation is my generation. Is rapid individualism, consumerism, um, anxiety driven. Everything is about oneself. That's why there's this nuts obsession with, oh, I'm anxious, I'm this, I'm that, because when everything is focused of being yourself and like you as an individual, everything becomes massive, like how you feel, what you want. And that's why we see from like, even we're getting quite early into it, but even like hookup culture, the reason that's so prevalent with people my age is because it's all about the individual. There's nothing to the community. It's nothing to do with decorum, elegance, gentlemanly, being feminine. It's none of that. It's just, what do I want? What do I want now? And that you can extrapolate that to every single angle, from jobs to anything. Yeah.
Interesting. Self-interest. I think I'm like that. I think I'm all the things you described. I've got anxiety problems. I'm selfish. I think maybe I'm like a Zoomer, but I still hate it and think they're bad. But is it really like I read then? Is it as bad as I read about in the? Because you're a Zoomer, you're 20 or something. Is it as bad as I read about in the newspapers?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like, I'd say, well, not in the sense, I wouldn't say it's normal for anxiety for a menu. I think it's all about the people you're out with. Like, if I'm with my mates and we're down the pub, no one's get anxiety ordering chips, but they might, like, if I'm with, some person who's a vegan, that's not beyond like the realm possibility, and like it's common for, like, if you're a meat eater or whatever, to kind of look down upon a bit. And I've seen that a bit more. Like, I had a debate the other day when I went up to Edinburgh, and I was the only person in the room who thought eating meat actually like was good for you. Everyone else was just like heart disease and all this. So I wouldn't say it's like that, but I'd say, yeah, it's just the rapid individualism. I see it constantly from my friends to, not all my friends, but some of my friends, to what people do, even in the respect of fitness. And I think fitness and stuff is brilliant, and like it's obviously good to do, good for your health and everything. But my generation is quite focused on that, but not from a aspect of getting stronger, but it's an aspect of the individual, about looks, about Instagram. Um, so I'd say we're the most insecure generation ever, for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and everyone's having surgeries. Did you see that one? People are having surgeries so that Zoomers look older than millennials. Have you seen that?
Like, what, are you just reading like lad Bible like
No, no,
quotes or
it's
something?
just things I see. We do a lot of on headliners on GB News. A lot of stupid topics come up in the kind of fun section. And one thing I keep seeing, I can't remember if I saw it there or elsewhere, was that it was like, why do Zoomers look older than millennials? And they were getting all these like lip fillers and all these weird fillers, and it actually doesn't look good. And they end up looking older because you guys are all so insecure that you're getting like surgeries.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Like with lip fillers. Like, I remember when I was in maybe year 10, and there was someone with like maybe even year 9. They had fake tan. I mean, it was like Vicky Bollard kind of thing, like fake tan lips, like it. And then so many other girls were getting lips, and then it was incredible as well seeing like how quick people flipped from like kind of regular people to just, I mean, like borderline prostitutes, kind of, as not to like obviously slut shame or anything like that, but I've really experienced kind of how much people have changed by our culture. Like, you sometimes meet, even like men included, you meet people who are kind of innocent people, good-hearted people, and then something flips when they hit 16 or something, and they just go off the rails with our degenerate culture. And we're seeing that with everything from kind of sex to abortion to drugs to alcohol. Like, it's just horrendous. Like, when I'm with many people, and I'm in a relationship, and we believe in certain things about sex outside marriage, which I know is the most controversial thing kind of these days. But like, to have that view now is like insane, to think that like sex should be with commitment. And I think that kind of the heart of the downfall of modern culture is sex outside commitment, because it's resulted in marriages failing, birth rates failing, people being unhappy. You got record amount of women in their 30s not having babies, being depressed. And I think all a lot of like the problems in society right now can actually be boiled down to sex outside commitment.
I might have asked you this before, but why are you so different from other Zoomers? Why do you think that happened?
I'd say it's because, well, one, I didn't go to uni because I thought, even though I was pushed to go to uni, because um, I would say I'm different because I've listened to people like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. I've COVID woke me up big time, and then from that I kind of became more Christian. I became more in touch with things that are kind of bigger than me. And when you don't focus on, same thing with the consumerism and the rapid individualism, which I spoke about, when yourself is not your focus, it's easy to kind of focus on other things, and then it takes you out of it. And you only kind of really realize that when you meet people who do focus on themselves. And I know you say you do, but I wouldn't say that's true, because you have a spiritual faith. You talk about big ideas, big topics. So it's not like you are what what you say, like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe when I'm like worried about mental health stuff, that is the focus is on myself. It's hard when you're struggling for it not to be. But I know what you mean. You were saying off camera that your other mentors are me and Andrew Tate. Those are the two you mentioned.
Yeah, I've got a picture. Oh, it's not there today. Yeah.
You took it down for this, but
Yeah.
anyone watching the video, Rory managed to delete the video last time we did this. That's why it didn't come out, because he's such a zoomer. But the video, if anyone's watching, I've just realized, apart from looking like a child's bedroom, you know what? You also look like you're in a Norwegian prison. The bed looks really minimalist. But you got those curtains. It looks like exactly what they'd give you. Every time I've seen like videos, there was like a heavy metal guy that killed someone. I remember watching like some clip of him, and I was like, he was in a Norwegian prison. It just looked like a halls of residence in England. You know what I mean? I was like a student accommodation. I was like, wow, you got to go if you're gonna kill someone. Even that guy Breivik, not to make it
Oh
dark,
no.
he,
Oh
he, he
no.
had he had 3 rooms and a PlayStation, and I'm like,
Blimey.
if you're gonna kill people, go to Norway.
I wonder.
Not really.
Yeah,
Go on.
they got an interesting system though, but I think it does have. I'm not for like if someone does something wrong, you shouldn't give them a PlayStation and give them a luxury. But I do think that punishment doesn't work. Like, over 50% recommit, and people were banging on about we need to be tougher with prisons. It's like, hang on, it's clearly not working. You look at other Scandinavian countries that don't have that; they have way less recommitment rates. So it's like, very basic, you can see that punishment doesn't work. Like, even I would say how I grew up, my parents weren't strict and stuff, and that meant that when I did something, it wasn't about consequences, it was about kind of almost shame for my actions. Like, I've never had the notion of, like, you I don't know, you're banned from this, you're banned from that. It's always been like, we're disappointed. And I think when people value, and this is also kind of stringing into God, like when people don't hold themselves accountable, they're very dangerous. It's like, kind of, even on an extreme degree, like a rapist. Like, they're often very charming and nice, but it's what happens behind the closed doors that's the key thing. And that's why, like, as well, with, I talk about God a lot here, with young people being so godless, like 3.9% of young people now identify as Christian in the UK. That means that everything else doesn't matter as much, because if the only person who's seeing you is if someone else can see you, then you can do anything. If you don't have something overlooking you of what you're doing and a moral conscience and moral compass within that, then you kind of reign free.
Well, it's interesting you find rapists charming, but what is I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I've got to roast you doing this podcast. It's part of it. And we'll get into the proper topics in a minute. But I didn't know 3.9% of young people are Christian. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. So
what did you say?
that's between, I think it's between 18 and 25 by the ONS. That it used to be like 5.1, but it went down to 3.9%. It's miniature. Yeah.
That's who consider themselves Christian.
Yeah, but they only classify that as 18 to 25, I think. But below that, it's so minuscule. But what's interesting as well, what's happening in Christianity is people who are older, so like I think it's 50 or 60s plus, are becoming more Christian, and people below who are younger are becoming less Christian, because the older people look at the dismantling society and they obviously didn't realize that was held up by faith. And then and then young people are so individualistic and useless that they are the God of themselves. So then why they don't need anything above them, because they think they are God almost.
Yeah, interesting. I think we're learning, I think everyone would agree with this on this podcast, that so much of what we took for granted was Christian. It was a European take on Christianity, and it was very specific. And really, we're losing that, and we see everything that goes with it. Yeah, we sort of took a lot for granted. We thought things were sort of secular meritocracy and things like this, but it turns out it wasn't. My thing now is I've realized atheism, I've said this before, buddy, atheism is just another sect of Christianity in this. It's another development from Christianity, because you don't have atheists in most of the world. And, atheists in this culture are really saying we were taking on all the ethics of Christianity and all the advantages. We're just getting rid of the spiritual belief part. But you're not getting people from, you've got the Islamic world, you've got people who are Buddhist. But you don't get these atheists in the same way. You might get people who are atheists, but they don't see it as a sort of ideology in the same way. And I'm convinced now that's just come from a Christian. It's just a kind of last stage of a Christian culture or something. They still want to retain the ethics. Anyway, I don't know. Someone can shoot me down on that who's done more work on it. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Because I had an interesting conversation with a friend who he just dismissed the Bible, anything that was in there. And, it's fine to not be a Christian or whatever, but it's, if you actively dismiss the Bible or anything like that, I think there is a sense of arrogance, because it's, the most popular book of all time ever. It is the most sold book every single year, beyond any book sale ever. It's not even in the charts, because it always is the best. What is spoken about in the Bible has withstood time. Not one thing Jesus did could not be taken as good today. So contextually, it's completely cement. 10 Commandments, everything. So to just dismiss that, you do need some form of arrogance. It's a controversial thing to say, I think, but if you dismiss the Bible and Christianity, you're arrogant. There's no other way. Because even if you look at it from a view of, isn't this bollocks? Jesus walked on water. Yeah, sure he did, and all this stuff. You look at the principles of Christianity where it comes to relationships, where it comes to living, like, you can't deny that works. Like, sex before marriage, for instance, makes people, like couples, have better sexual satisfaction. It means divorce rates are lowered. What it says about love, commitment, everything. It's, even if you're not a Christian, there's people who aren't Christian who follow the rules of the Bible because they know it is a good moral way to live, even if they think everything else is nonsense. That's how powerful the Bible is.
Well, we've totally alienated our atheist audience, but let me just. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Although if it was based purely on popularity, we'd all have to read Harry Potter. So I'm not sure it should be just based on that. But you're right, the Bible is still smashing it. Before we get into the proper topics, I just want to ask you as well. Do you ever watch 90s films? Because I suddenly thought, I wonder if Roy's actually watched any of these films. Because the young kids, they haven't watched any. I've realized now the 70s and the 90s, I mean, this is kind of well established, are two of the best film decades. I think the 90s might be even better than the 70s. And I don't think it's just nostalgia. I think it just actually probably is. But do you ever watch like 90s films, like
Um,
Carlito's Way
I I don't think so. I mean,
or
Blade Runner,
Goodfellas?
is that the 2000s? Is that
Blade Runner's the 80s.
eight? Yeah, I've seen. I mean, I
Totally
can't
clueless, unless you mean the remake.
I can't really remember. I mean, I've watched the old Blade Runner, and I've definitely seen, or like, what, Fiddler on the Roof? When was that made?
82. This is what I was worried about. I mean, have you seen at least things like Goodfellas?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Think so. And you haven't seen Carlito's Way, and you haven't seen Good Will Hunting, or you haven't
No.
seen, I don't know, any 90s movies. I knew this was going to be a problem. Demolition Man.
Wait, do you know Into the Wild?
Yeah,
Is that?
that's not 90s.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I knew this was going to happen. I mean, let alone 70s. So you're telling me you probably haven't watched Taxi Driver
No.
or any of those either. Okay. This is a big problem with Zoomers. They don't know anything before their generation. This is what I've heard about them. They just don't know anything about the past.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I'd say in general, there's definitely disrespect for anything that. But I mean, I'm terrible with films and stuff, and I've seen films that I don't even remember seeing, so I'm not a good person to ask. But I should watch more old stuff for sure.
I envy you because I don't envy you because it sounds like you're clueless about films, but I envy you that you could watch these all for the first time. Fight Club. You could watch all these
No, I've seen Fight Club.
American
Yeah,
Beauty,
yeah.
Usual Suspects. You could just watch endless 90s films, and they're all so good, and you haven't watched probably most of them. I just have to rewatch them because all films are crap now, and I've seen them 10 times. Have you watched Heat?
Wait, is that the F1 drive? Is it?
It's with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and it's
Um,
by Michael Mann. It's like a 3 hour movie. You've never watched Heat?
I don't
That's
know.
like incomprehensible. Imagine the movie's got Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and you don't watch it because you're an arrogant Zoomer who's just watching 3 second TikTok videos.
I
I mean,
don't have
imagine that.
TikTok. Yeah.
You should at least watch it. I mean, how many times did Pacino? It's the only time Pacino and De Niro were together on screen at the same time. I mean, it's crazy that you haven't watched that.
Yeah,
This means nothing. This means nothing to a kid of Rory's generation. He doesn't know any of these words are. I just thought I'd ask. Carl Benjamin did a whole bit on this. He just did a whole video of his films all Zoomers should watch. He did like an hour on it. You can catch up with that and get back to me.
Yeah, write notes.
Speaking of Zoomers, so I thought we'd do just predictions for this year. I don't think it's too late in January. We're still in January. We wanted to do 2024 predictions and get Rory's very different take. And someone who, well, Rishi's a similar age to me. I think he might technically be Gen X and I'm millennial, but it's very, very close. I've started to think about Rishi and why he's sort of not grasping how badly the election is going to go. So I wanted to ask you about your election predictions. There was a video out today of Rishi on the streets speaking to a woman about the NHS. Did you see that?
Yeah.
As we record on Friday 19th, it's just come out. And what was funny is of course, people on Twitter have been using an edited version where it looks like he just walks away from the woman mid-sentence, which he doesn't. He walks with her in the full video and shakes her hand at the end, and it's much nicer. You know, it's a nice metaphor for the Tories, like just saying, "Oh, we're doing a great job," not listening to the people, then walking off would be a perfect metaphor for where the Tories are. But that's not what he actually did. Anyway, I started to think about this theory, and I've only just thought of it today, so it might be a bit garbled. But basically, Rishi is like, he's sort of on my generation. He's like maybe a year older. And I thought, yeah, maybe he's just so stuck in this generation that wants to go back to the 90s and wants things to be fine. Because Dominic Cummings said this on a podcast. He said the problem with all our politicians is they want to go back to that period between the Berlin Wall coming down and 2000 and 9/11 in 2001, before you were even born. And they want to go back to that nice period. But we're never going back to that. And we're in this period of conflict and change, but they can't get their heads around it. And I thought maybe that's why Rishi is so complacent about this massive electoral defeat he's headed for. So we've had this poll from Lord Frost and the Conservative Brent Alliance that shows the Tories are going to get wiped out in a landslide. We've had this other poll that says, I think it was 50% of people under 50 won't vote Tory or something like that. It was some massive stat. And I should have had it in front of me, but I don't. Anyway, the Tories going to get wiped out by all metrics. But what is your prediction for the election, and what are they up to? Why are they just sleepwalking into oblivion?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think they're going to get absolutely destroyed. I think it's going to be even worse than predicted because you're going to have, but yeah, because you've got Reform UK that obviously going to split the vote everywhere. They recently hit 12% in the polls. I think that their push now about immigration, I think, is just them grasping for straws that they can kind of salvage anything. And I know immigration for a lot of people is a massive issue, but the Tories have failed on every metric possible, and they've also failed in immigration as well, which is ironic while they're banging on about it. But the only reason they can is because they know that's where Labour are soft at, and that if they just keep hammering home that, maybe people realise, oh, Labour are soft at it, let's vote Tories, because that's all they got. The economy, absolute travesty, NHS. I think there was like 2.5 million waiting list when in 2010 when Labour were in, and now there's like 6.3 million. They've absolutely failed to bits with that. It's on its last legs. You had COVID, and now you have this. Economic growth's down the drain. They're one thing they bang on about, they're terrible with, and now they're trying to scramble something with Rwanda, which even if it goes through, won't help them at all. So I think they're going to get completely annihilated. And I think that, yeah, Reform UK, I'm interested to see what they're going to do, because they're hitting 12% now, but when the election comes, will people actually vote for Reform? I don't know. And even if they do, they're so spread out. But I would love to, even though I'm not going to vote for Reform, I'd love to see Reform win a seat, or Richard Tice win in Hartlepool. Because I think it would just be amazing to see like a party actually get a few seats, and then as soon as they get a few seats, the recognition starts, and I think they could potentially, I mean, this is very bold to say, but I think potentially overrun, the Conservatives if it carries on. That if the Conservatives try and push home immigration so much, get rid of all their moderates, Reform UK will eventually just be the one, I think, for the right of the country.
Who are you going to vote for then?
I'm spoiling my ballot.
Really?
Yeah, I'm no party represents me apart from the Libertarian Party, but they won't be running where I am. So
you'll just write Libertarian on there or something?
yeah, yeah. I mean, for the last like local elections, I just spoiled it and said none of these, and I think I'll do the same because, and like Reform, that they're decent, but they're not like, they're nothing groundbreaking, and I disagree with. They just bang on about immigration. What else are they going to do? They got some good policies about the NHS, about helping regular people and stuff. But also, I think another interesting aspect with what's happening is net zero. And coming the election, what's going to happen when you're going to have Labour MPs talking about shutting down factories or whatever for net zero and hitting certain goals. And then you're going to have right wingers saying to keep them open, and you're going to have a complete flip and inverse from what happened under Thatcher. You're going to have the right becoming the party of the workers of keeping things open, and you're going to have the left closing them. And I think that's going to kind of really change the political dynamic in this year. What is seriously going to happen with net zero? We're seeing what's happening in Port Talbot with that. Like, what's going to happen when the unions are saying to the Labour Party, like, we want to save jobs, what are you doing? And Labour are going to have to be like, we need to hit net zero. And then who are they going to go to? It could potentially be Reform UK, or who knows? Yeah.
I think that's interesting, and I always think it's ironic when Keir Starmer's trying to close down a northern coal mine, as happened with Cumbria. He didn't want it to open at all. There's definitely some irony there, and that is interesting, but I wanted to quickly check first. This spoiling ballot thing, I used to think, I think I might have done it in the past. I tend to think it's a bit gay. I mean, spoiling your ballot, I mean, why can't you just do what I'm going to do, look at it and just vote for the most right-wing party on the ticket? Why can't you or you can at least vote for a Christian party? How do you know there won't be like Christian People's Alliance or some obscure Christian? Because I've voted for them before.
Really? I've never seen that ever. If there's some kind of decent local thing, yeah, I'll vote for them.
They sent me the best flyer of all the parties. I was looking at because they all sent me these flyers, and they had, what did they have? They had observe democracy by like getting Brexit done. I was like, fair enough. They had like tackle London crime, great. Make big corporations and tech corporations particularly pay tax. Because Google and all these people were avoiding tax, Amazon, whoever it was. And then it was protect the lives of the unborn. I was like, who could argue with any of those? So I was like, yeah, those are my policies. So then they got like 200 or something, and the Labour MP got about 80,000. But it was a sort of protest vote in itself. So it's not much different from spoiling the ballot, but it's a bit better than spoiling the ballot. And I think I would consider voting reform just to send the message. Labour's going to win in my area, whatever happens. And that's our system. So my vote doesn't matter at all. But I would consider sending a message by voting reform as the kind of, not that I like everything about them either, but the kind of best alternative to the Tories. Did you see that series of X posts they put out where they had all the immigration stuff in sort of quite stark graphics about how insane immigration's become? I thought that was pretty effective.
Yeah, they got a good social media team with some of their graphics. Like they're quite good at stuff like that, and it's interesting seeing even the Conservatives. This is quite nerdy. Seeing the Conservatives' Twitter, they're trying to like adopt what they're doing, reform like big time, and it's like complete switch up. They're putting stuff out, and you're like, like, is this reform right now? Because all they're doing is appealing to reform voters right now. But I think the Tories got to realise that's not going to win in the election. They're just going to lose more people the more extreme they go in that direction, because reform are an established brand with trust of that. Well, apart from standing down last election, but like, which I'm sure is on loads of people's minds. But the more extreme the Tories get, the more they're going to alienate their actual supporters, because they've already lost so many. And I think, Leanne's and Zuella, while they do represent a lot of people, the Conservative Party, that's not going to bring the Conservative Party back. I mean, maybe because there's kind of this sweep of right-wing politics in Europe, but how can they outdo reform, really, when they've failed on everything they're bang on about?
Well, they might be copying their social media, but I don't think they're really copying their policies or anything. I mean, Lee Anderson just resigned. Suella also voted against the Rwanda bill, didn't she? She was one of only 11 that finally voted against it, from memory. So it does sort of, I do think the actual main party is still going for this one nation thing or some kind of balance, isn't it? Because we saw with the Rwanda bill, Lee Anderson went a bit early, and Suella perhaps is just doing that to show where she is so she can go back in future. But if you look at it, the right of the party is kind of lost there, hasn't it? They haven't got the numbers.
Yeah, but they still have so much influence. I mean, Farage has like unbelievable influence of like the Conservative Party, and I think a lot of them think that certain things will help them more than they actually do. Like, if I was them, I would bang on about immigration because it's all you have, but you're also incompetent at it. And the reason that's peddled is because of the influence of people like Farage, who have a now massive swing of like Tory voters now, really.
Don't you think that comes down to what I said before, that they just won't tackle the reality, like immigration? They just can't. Whitehall, Westminster, whatever you want to call it. It's like Dominic Cummings said, they won't get their head around the reality, because that is now the number one issue. I mean, sometimes cost of living beats it depending on which poll. But they're there. They know the people are most concerned about immigration, but they're just still too squeamish. Now, they would say this Rwanda bill is them tackling it, but it's a kind of, no one thinks it's going to, hardly anyone thinks it's going to succeed. I think the government gives it a 50% chance of succeeding or something. It's not even, no one thinks it's going to do much. It's certainly not going to tackle legal immigration, which is massively out of control. It's just maybe going to try and send a few people back, but which it won't, or it just sends a few people, or maybe acts as a deterrent. Most people think it won't. So, I mean, why isn't it just like failure to isn't it a failure just to address people's real concerns? That's what's gonna finish the Tories off, isn't it? Actually, on that question, do you think that they are going to be wiped out completely? That's the big question, isn't it? Because we're doing predictions for 2024. Will the Tories be completely wiped out?
What you mean, like 0 MPs?
No, I mean that they just fall apart as a party, right? They can't even continue. They break into something different. They've split up, or something unrecognizable, and we haven't thought of. Or we have thought of, but we haven't seen.
I think they will stay together as a party, but I think they'll get completely annihilated. And I agree with what you mean about that. Yeah, you could say regular people with immigration, but I would say the reason they're failing on immigration is also because they've decimated the economy so much. There's not even an avenue to support British workers and kind of have that more populist approach to it, because they can't, because so much of the economy is reliant on, you could say cheap. Well, I mean, it depends what sector, but their argument be cheap skilled labor, but there's no alternative because they've decimated everything else. There's like the NHS is a complete joke, and it's like completely failing. Growth is horrendous. Like everything is terrible. So I think I don't know how they would even tackle immigration, because if they properly cut immigration, I think the country would be even more screwed right now. Like even if people want low immigration, and I understand for a lot of people that's priority, like it'd be terrible because they haven't left anything behind to actually keep the UK up.
That was a really interesting point that Dr. Paul Morland made, who was just on this podcast. I'm sure you listened to the episode about birth rates, and he was saying the only problem is if you do suddenly cut immigration massively and people suddenly can't get a plumber, not that you can now, but suddenly all services just don't work, people were going to not like that, and they're going to, even though they think they want zero immigration, and I certainly say things like that as well, then suddenly the reality of it will be unworkable. And I do see that argument. He thinks that can't survive. If people suddenly can't, nothing functions, they'll suddenly say we need an immigration. But yeah, I've heard that argument. I was going to say quickly as well, the Tories, right? It's so funny. Farage said to Jacob Rees-Mogg on GBD, he's like, "Is this the worst it's ever been for the Tories?" And Jacob was like, "Oh no, not at all." In 1846, and he said I think he said 1845 or 6 to 1874, they didn't win a majority, and they were split over the corn laws and all this other stuff. So it's a classic Jacob Rees-Mogg answer, like, "Oh no, this is nothing. You want to see 1846?" So this is the worst it's been for the Tories since the sort of 19th century. So that is pretty bad. I mean, I remember them being in the wilderness when you were not born, but it was always, there was a program called This Week on BBC One, Andrew Neil, and it'd always say, "So, Michael Portillo, another crisis in the Tory party." And it was just like, crisis, crisis, crisis. You had, what's his name? I just said his name and I've forgotten, as leader. I've just said his name and I've forgotten. Howard, what's his name again?
Howard.
This happens to you. Go on. No, beyond a certain age. No. This happens to you beyond a certain age. I'll remember it in a second, but I'm just proving the difference between us in Michael Howard was the leader. It was a kind of he was sort of an old steady hand they brought in, but it was kind of that kind of era in the wilderness before Cameron, basically, as I recall. Anyway, Cameron sort of saved them, and just by copying Blair, essentially. I might be getting some of that messed up, but I think I'm correct. So I don't know, man. It's hard to know if they really are going to. Everyone knows this, that first past the post stops our system really changing, and a proportional representation would be the massive difference. Then we'd really see something very different. Reform would have real power then, but I just don't know. I don't know if they're going to cling on. Most likely, Sunak gets spanked in the election. They bring in maybe Kemi, and they just kind of stay in the wilderness for a long time. I thought Farage would come in and take over as leader of the Tories when he was doing so well at the conference, and now I can't really see it as much. I posted it on X just so I had the post there ready in case I was right. It would look like an amazing prediction. But actually, most likely he comes back to reform and as leader and really makes an impact from that direction. What do you think? Is that what's going to happen with Farage?
Yeah, I mean, he's failed as an MP 7 times, so he's failed so much. So
that's such a mainstream media talking point. I mean, the guy's had the biggest influence of almost anyone.
I'm not digging him in that respect. I mean, I'm not a fan of Farage, but I do respect him massively in what he's done. Like, he's managed to do more in British politics than anybody single-handedly, especially with not even being an MP. It's absolutely incredible. But I think because I know there was a poll recently that, like, in Carswell's seat, that if he ran, he would win. And I do actually think he will take it. But if he runs, he kind of has to win because he went on I'm a Celebrity. He's a presenter now. People love him a lot more. He's a lot more moderate in a lot of respects. But I think what I'm predicting to happen is after the election, Zuela's going to defect to Reform, and then Reform are going to really increase to the point where, it could get to the point where they're like neck and neck with the Tories nationally in polls, and that won't obviously result in seats. But, Zuela in Fareham, which place I used to live, she was my local MP. Like, she'll get voted in again, and if she defects to Reform, they will vote for her because she'll be even more like extreme with immigration. So people will love that, and people will vote for her. But I think, and also with the Labour Party, there's also a thing going on with what's happening in Gaza. A lot of people are not going to vote for Keir Starmer, and like right now that's fine for him because he can lose some young votes. But I think in the long term, if Keir Starmer carries on with that, I think that'll completely shoot him in the foot, because similar to what's happening in America with Biden, if Keir Starmer refuses to call for a ceasefire, then like it will eventually trickle down to older demographics and potentially lose a lot of votes, because I personally know a lot of kind of lefties who vote Labour forever who said they're not going to vote for Keir Starmer because he refuses to call for a ceasefire. And also in America, Biden's fallen off a cliff because he won't condemn Israel or ask for a ceasefire. So yeah, I think that's also, people underestimate how put together Labour is right now, because they're also divided massively with the left and kind of centre left.
Interesting. So I want to hit both of those. Firstly, the Labour thing. Second, but firstly, so Lee Anderson. Do you think Lee Anderson also goes to reform? Because you said Suella's going to go to reform, which is interesting. I hadn't heard too much about that, but that's an interesting prediction.
I don't know. I can't see Lee Anderson going to. I don't know why. I just can't. I think he's too kind of chummy with the other Tories to leave. But I can picture Suella going, because she's
interesting.
Like, she really wants immigration cut, like, and reform do that. And I think she knows that in her constituents they're so anti-immigration that if she does go there, they will vote for her because she's got strong support.
Yeah, it is hard to, if the Tories just consistently fail to deal with immigration, it is hard to see how people just don't go across to reform. You could end up with a Tory. I could suddenly picture when you were saying it then, Suella goes across, Farage comes back, they end up the second party, and the Tories become this third party, and they become kind of Lib Dems. Maybe they merge with the Lib Dems, because they are basically Lib Dems anyway, half the Tories.
Yeah.
That could happen. And then we have Labour as the biggest party, Shudder, Reform, and then the Lib Dem Tories. I don't know, it's just that's crazy. Yeah. The One Nation Lib Dem Tories. You know, these things have happened. Things have happened. The Lib Dems came through as the third party. That was a change. There have been these big changes. Anything could happen. It's an interesting time. So, and the other point, Labour, yeah, they're falling apart because of their. Well, they're not falling apart. They're going to win, but that's one of their many splits. Is the Israel-Palestine issue, isn't it? And they just. Which one are you? Which side are you? You've got to pick one.
Great, nice and nuanced. Keep it black and white. I mean, I think Israel, has more than a right to exist. I'm not an anti-Israel person at all, by the way. Just to make that clear, like I'm all for Jews.
I already think you are now because you've said that. The way you set that up, I now immediately think you are. But they shouldn't. From the river to the sea, and then you just have a Palestine flag just out.
No. I'm not for that, but I do think that. Like, for instance, the IDF has a worse killing rate than Hamas right now of civilians. Like, there's, I think, 28,000 dead. There's, I think, over 10,000 women and children. And people make the argument, oh, well, Hamas is using them as human shields, which, I'm sure they are. Like, there's loads of evidence to support that. But that's irrelevant. You don't, like, no time ever, even the US that bombs the shit out of places like in Afghanistan or everywhere, even them would have more consideration for civilians than Israel are now. I mean, they have government ministers who have called them animals. And I'm not saying that all the Israeli government are terrible, and I'm not saying that at all. I don't have a problem with Israel existing at all. I like that there's a safe place for Jews around the world, and I'm not anti-Semitic remotely. But I don't care who you are, what you're about. If you're a woman or a kid dying, I mean, even a man dying, I find it sad, and I think that it's crazy. We're at a point where you can't even ask for a ceasefire without being called anti-Semitic. Like, I think, like, if you call for a ceasefire, I don't know how that's anti-Semitic. Like, I do not buy the notion that that's anti-Semitic, really.
No, I mean, I don't think it is either. But the idea is that it's not neutral. It's not a neutral statement you're pretending it is, because when Hamas have done October 7th, and given the whole history a ceasefire is unrealistic at this point, but after that. So
But no, but what?
the argument.
Yeah, but what would be so like if we use that argument of like October 7th, more people died and I'm not like it was horrific, biggest killing Jew since Holocaust, like absolute atrocity. With that, that's an atrocity, but surely if there's more atrocities on a scale about 20 times that, surely that's a justifiable retaliation and we should stop at that point. Surely, like how many people could it get? What if we got to 50,000? Do you think, well, like what's the maximum civilian death toll, would you say? Like,
I'm just asking you. I'm not taking a side. I mean, I've been pretty pro-Israel, but I've never been able to. It's not worth me even considering not being, because I have to work with Josh Harris. So it's not even worth thinking about. It's what I've realized is that if I even, I don't even have freedom of thought over it because I have to work with Josh. So if I even said anything like it wasn't 100% pro-Israel, it'd just be so insufferable that actually I can't be bothered even forming the thought. I'm kind of joking about a very serious topic, but I have actually toned down a little bit, taking really strong stances on some of these issues, because I'm like, why do I have to take a strong stance on every foreign policy thing, like on every conflict around it? Because there's so many now. Now I've got to become an expert in Yemen. And I was saying the other day, before that, all I knew about Yemen, all I knew about Yemen was it's where Chandler goes to get away from Janice in Friends. None of that will mean anything to you as a Zoomer. Those were just noises to you. But basically, the last time I heard about it was in a sitcom. Now I've got to know all about Yemen and the Houthis, and I've got to be an expert on Israel and Palestine. I'm like, guys, can I just focus on England, which is my country? All I want is focus on England, deport everyone, make England what it used to be when I grew up. That's it. That's all I want to do. Just very parochial, isolationist. That's my view at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like, I think isolationist the way forward for sure. Like, there's all this stuff, but we are funding and like we have massive ties with Israel. Like, we are involved in it. So if you said we should just cut ties and stuff, I mean, I think we should support Israel, but we shouldn't endorse, 10,000 kids plus. Like, well, I'm not sure what the number is now, but like like the IDF literally has a worse kill to civilian ratio than Hamas, according to Israel's own figures. Like, I'm not a tribal hack at all in this, and people are convinced, if there's a good argument.
Jewish listeners are going to hate it. Jewish listeners are going to hate it because they're going to talk about the Hamas atrocities. They're going to say they use civilians as shields and they target hospitals. They deliberately put themselves in hospitals. They're a terrorist organization, which of course they are. Only the BBC thinks they aren't. I'm just going to give that side of it because I am more on that side. And I want to at least give that side of it.
Yeah, but the issue when people say that is, it's like if there's let's say there's 10 Hamas fighters in a hospital, and there's also 600 women and children in the hospital, should you just blow up the hospital just because you shouldn't? But that's what's happening now. That's why we have an unprecedented amount of dead people. Like, and also even from the Israeli side, like if there's hostages taken by Hamas, surely they shouldn't, blow up everywhere because they're gonna kill the hostages as well. And I think we're already seeing a shift. I mean, Piers Morgan recently came out and even said like he thinks it's gone too far. And fair play to him, because everyone will hate him saying that, and it's the most unpopular opinion to have, really. But like he's got a point. Like what?
No,
we're gonna get to 50,000 casualties, and people are still gonna be saying, "Oh, well, it's Hamas in the buildings." Like,
Piers Morgan will say any bollocks he feels like at the time that will get the most clicks.
True.
I mean, the guy was the most rabidly pro-lockdown.
True.
Anti-vaxxers shouldn't have health care. Fascistic, evil bollocks. He blocked me over something I said over it. He's always outraged. Then he's outraged that, I don't know, Tommy Robinson's disrespecting the Quran. Then he changes, and then he's just all over the place. It's whatever thing he's like, how dare, he's always just outraged about something, but then the next day he's outraged about the other thing. Absolutely no principles whatsoever. So he's now isn't it also, your other point's wrong, because it's also very safe now to say ceasefire, how many casualties. That's the very safe position now, actually. It's the sort of more pro-Israel position is actually becoming more risky, I would say.
I mean, yeah, as the casualties build, for sure, but I don't think you can say that it's more risky to, like, if you're on a campus, or like if you say I'm pro-Israel, work in a news company, or tweet it, or like let's say I'm like, you're going to get way more attacks than if you say you're pro-Israel. And I think it used to be the other case, I agree, before October 7th, because people were unaware of the issue. But I mean, you get way more pushback, because then it's like, oh, you're anti-Semitic, you're sympathetic to Hamas, you're, whatever. Like,
yeah. It's interesting. It's kind of an issue where the right can kind of make some ground because they can't say anything positive about white people. Like when Claudine Gay and those others attacked, they said those awful things about, it's okay to call for genocide on campus, blah, blah, and they were kind of smirking about it and they were pathetic about it. And the woman from Penn was sacked, and then Claudine Gay at Harvard eventually went. She was woefully unqualified anyway, and she engaged in plagiarism and so on. But it was funny, and the funding was withdrawn, and people are really starting to know. It's funny on that issue of like the flagrant anti-Semitism of the woke movement. People are like, oh, hang on, what's going on here? It's been happening to white people for just decades.
I don't know. I do disagree with you about that case, because I think that, I mean, I'm a free speech absolutist, so if people want to call for genocide, like...
Yes, and if they were, that would have been an argument, but we know they're sort of completely anti-free speech in all of the cases. And suddenly they were free speech in that moment. If they were like, we have Nick Fuentes on campus today, and then tomorrow we have Tommy Robinson, and then we have Louis Farrakhan, but they don't do that. They just, I have the most anti-woke person. Those examples were probably too similar.
But then I do agree with you completely about the same people who have the Palestine flags, the same people saying "shut up, you Nazi" and all this. But within that was cancel culture on a teacher, and I disagree with that because of what she said. People did all this background stuff and then tried to cancel her, and then she got all this stuff happen. And I think that is cancel culture, and I'm against that. I think she should be able to say ridiculous views like that are completely nuts, without losing her job. Or
she was incompetent as well, so maybe that was the trigger. But she did plagiarism, she was incompetent, she was a terrible leader. Why shouldn't she lose her job on those grounds?
But that would be separate, because the reason people found out that was because they wanted to cancel her. They wanted to dig up dirt on her, which is cancel culture, for something she said.
Yeah. But if you steal a chocolate bar and then I start digging dirt and I find out you've done some murders, I don't go, well, I'm not going to sack Roy because of the chocolate, because I only found out about the murders because of the chocolate bar. They found out she was incompetent because she did an incompetent thing in front of the world.
No, but it's cancel culture. Like, how would you define cancel culture if that's not... She said
it's not cancel culture because she'd engaged in plagiarism and was woefully unqualified for a position. It's not. It was sacking someone because they were terrible at their job.
The reason
it wasn't because of cancel culture. It wasn't because like of an opinion she had or something she tweeted 8 years ago.
No, but it was because that's what the trigger was. The reason people found that was because of what she said. So they tried to target her. They tried to find something to get her sacked, some juice to say, right, you're fired, because they don't like her because of what she said. If they didn't say anything, no one would look to dig up dirt on her plagiarism. It's because of what she said.
Yeah, it's interesting. But what she said also was an example in itself of her being bad at her job, because she handled the question so badly and she handled the situation so badly. And it revealed that she was completely enthralled to woke ideology and the grotesqueries therein. So that in itself, it's not like she did something innocuous. I see what you mean, but the thing she did was so bad in itself. If she'd said something that people if she said like, I don't know, I don't think people should kneel before the football, then people had found out that, I don't know, tried to find something about her sister. I mean, that's cancel culture. What she did was like showing that she was bad at her job because she was so woke and lost to that ideology. And then all they did was find other examples of her being woke and also, by the way, incompetent.
But what was wrong with what she said, though, that people should...
Well, it's interesting, yeah. The only argument, what was wrong with what she said was that the woke clearly have a blind spot when it comes to certain things. And one of them is anti-Semitism, because they now see Israel as the oppressor. They also see Jews as white quite a lot of the time, and therefore bad, because white people are so evil. So the problem is, it showed the double standards of wokeness, that you can call for genocide of a certain group, and you basically will be protected by the custodians of woke ideology. That was what was wrong with it. Had they been free speech absolutists, yes, that was the only argument that could be made. But we know they're not, and that, yes, they did try and half-heartedly make that argument. But they also said weird things like I'd have to check the guidance and know the context and all this kind of stuff, and they were kind of weird about it. If they just said, yes, obviously it's disgusting to say that, but then again, we're so free speech absolutist on campus, that's what we believe in. Yes, but they didn't say that really, and two, no one would believe them if they did, because it's obviously not true.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Because that is a good point.
very hard to beat because I do this for a living. Now you do this for a living as well. You're a very good debater. I don't even like debate, by the way. I don't really like. I do softball questions and banter, and I get to hear from the guests. But I actually don't even like debate. It's kind of a weird thing. People, it comes from posh schools and stuff. Debate, but you are a debate. You like debate, and you do it on your podcast all the
Yeah,
time.
I do.
By
I
the
do like
way,
debate. Yeah.
speaking of debate, your view on Hamas is the same as your favorite Andrew Tate. You're aligned with Tate on he says the same
No,
things as you on
no.
Palestine.
Oh no.
Yeah, you're getting
No.
more and more like him. Same haircut,
Oh
same
dear.
views on Palestine,
Oh no,
same
but
views on
yeah.
hoes.
No, but he doesn't. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't know. He'll say it, but and also I'm way more pro-Israel than Andrew Tate is. Like I think Israel has a right to exist. I stand with Jewish people. I support Jewish people going to Israel. I think it's great they have a safe haven. I think like just Jews having a safe place on the planet that they can call home and be safe at is so important, and it should not be dismantled at all. And I think that when people say they want to dismantle, right, this is one thing I agree is anti-Semitic. If people say they want to abolish the whole state of Israel, then I think that's anti-Semitic because that would result in a lot of Jews dying, and that's genocidal. So I agree with that when people say they want to dismantle the whole of Israel. I agree. That is anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we agree on that. And by the way, if you haven't listened to previous episodes with Rory, he hates Andrew Tate and always attacks me about it. So a funny joke now is to say that Rory's like Andrew Tate. That's why I'm hammering that one joke so hard, and I'm enjoying it. But that brings me to, let's see, we've done 15 minutes. It's annoying because I don't have my timer in front because we had a tech issue. But the point is, it brings me to a very related topic I wanted to mention, which we were talking about Claudine Gay and Harvard and all that, which is this diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've just written an article I'm about to release on my Substack of whether DEI will finally die, because it does seem to be in trouble. And it makes me think, we're talking about 2024. Will woke die in 2024? It's a big claim, but this is a question we could look at just for the end of this podcast, because a few things have happened. Claudine Gay sacked. Everyone said, oh, she's a diversity hire. Bill Ackman, billionaire, came out with a long essay saying why diversity, equity, and inclusion is racist. He called it inherently racist and illegal. Mark Cuban tried to defend it, but Elon Musk took him apart on Twitter and said, I can't wait for a short, white, Asian woman to join the Dallas Mavericks, the basketball team. That led to all these memes from Wei Wu, which is a parody account of this Chinese woman. I think it comes from the character from Silicon Valley, the sitcom actually originally. But and she's tweeting like contract when contract, like Mr. Cuban and all this, and trying to so it became this thing. Cuban was saying something like, oh no, it's diversity and equity and inclusion, it's not discriminatory, it's just choosing from a wider pool of people, and why wouldn't you, blah blah. And everyone's just taking him apart saying no, it's racist. What's really interesting is we got Bill Ackman on board now, who's a sort of lefty, and he's backing this Democrat candidate. I think he's called Dean Phillips, and Dean Phillips, and he's backing him. And suddenly Dean Phillips dropped all mention of DEI from his website after Bill Ackman made a $1 million donation.
Wow.
And Dean Phillips said, it's nothing to do with that. I do what I want. And Bill Ackman posted quite a funny thing saying, Dean's getting educated on the topic. Well, let's see what he says now once he's educated, which is so funny because for multiple reasons. I mean, one, it's using the woke language of educated, but it's using it against wokeness, which is quite interesting to me. And two, it's just quite funny that he's like, let's just see what he says from the guy that's giving him $1 million donation for his campaign. Let's see if he educates himself, see what he says. Yeah. It's just kind of hilarious to me. But I'm happy because it's a win for my side, which is anti-woke, which is pro-sanity. I don't know how much you followed any of that, but to me it's like, oh, this stuff is in trouble. And the one last thing that prompted it was PricewaterhouseCoopers, who employ 46,000 people in the United States, and they are one of the big four accounting firms. I'm doing all this from memory, by the way, guys. How impressive is this? They come out and say, okay, we're changing our diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and we've changed it all. Now they revise it slightly. What they actually did was revise it, and people of the End Wokeness, the X account, revealed what they've done. I went to check the website as well, and it is correct. At least the thing they've changed it to is correct. I couldn't check officially the one they changed it from, but I'm very sure it's right. I'm trying to find it in front of me right now. I've got it in here. So they had this internship called the START program, right? And this is a massive, massive company, and they had this eligibility requirement, And they said to be eligible for the START internship, students must self-identify as a member of, and they just go on about loads of Black, Hispanic, Alaska Native Hawaiian. There's a ridiculous list of everybody. And now they changed the language to students who have demonstrated a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion principles will be preferred. No idea what that means. And then they say, as part of the firm's commitment to equal employment opportunity, we further encourage students to identify as, then the long list of silly races like Latinx and all these made up things. So they changed the language, but they didn't really get rid of it. But they did that because they're worried about this Supreme Court ruling that makes it more likely they'll get sued. And sorry, I've spoken for a very long time here, but the point is, wouldn't do this on a normal interview podcast, but the point is, they are slightly changing a bit reluctantly. So DEI, whatever you want to call it, it's not going to go easily, but I think it is going to go because once you've got truth against you and you've got billionaires against you like Elon Musk and Bill Ackman, and you've got both sides now against you of the political spectrum, you can't really, if we believe that Musk's a conservative, which he isn't really, but how long can this stuff last? So my question for you, Rory, is will this DEI stuff go, and will wokeness in general start to fall apart in 2024?
No, I mean, what do you mean in the UK or worldwide?
All that, and then it's just a no. Well, whichever you want. Let's start with the UK if you like.
Yeah.
Whichever you want.
With the UK, I'd say it won't because Labour are getting in, so it will only increase. You'll see a way more progressive, socially left, liberal view of things. And bearing in mind, all this stuff was under the Tories. So if it's under Labour, what the hell is it going to be when Keir Starmer struggled to say what a woman is, and he'll be the leader, let alone all the social aspects. So it'll just be on steroids, I think. I don't think it'll go away. I think that also the more older people die, the more woke society will get because younger people are just so liberal that it will just get worse inherently because they'll get older and then the older people die and then I don't think it will go the opposite way unless there's some massive awakening and push towards traditionalism. And I think we are seeing that across Europe to a respect about, even parents are now becoming kind of socially more in touch with what they actually think socially because they're seeing what's happened with younger people.
Yeah. And so we're behind Europe, I think. Or you might say we're ahead of Europe, or I don't know, you might have a different view or just irrelevant in a completely different world to Europe. My view is Starmer gets in, does all the woke stuff you're talking about, doesn't fix immigration, doesn't fix the economy, spends a load of money that we don't have or can't spend it, and then people are upset, whichever one it is, doesn't fix anything, does all the weird gender stuff, and then our real change happens, which is the change that's happening in Europe. Then our Farage moment happens. However it happens, I don't know how it's going to happen. Does it happen through proportional representation? Does Farage join the Tories? Do Reform take over from the Tories? Do the Tories just have to finally take on Reform-style policies? Whichever one it is, we get our moment after 5 years of Starmer madness. Now, people look at the Labour majority and they say, well, this is a two-term type majority, like Blair or anyone else. This is like an 8-year, 10-year thing, whatever. But do you think Starmer could be so bad, this is my theory, that actually maybe he does hang on, but only just hangs on, or it's so bad that he actually just loses after one election? Or is it just going to be 8 years or something of Labour?
I think that Labour will, I think it will be 8 years minimum. I think it could be way more because, and also you got to look at even people who think that the Conservatives have done a bad job. Like Labour will do a better job, I'm sure, on the economy, on the NHS. I guarantee that they'll do a better job. Like if I was going to vote for...
You guarantee?
Yeah.
Like, can we get that in writing? So you guarantee Labour will do a better job on the economy and the NHS?
Yeah. Yeah, I guarantee waiting lists will drop, growth will increase.
Maybe the NHS I might give you. I won't give you the economy. I'd be amazed if they did much better.
But it can't be any worse. Like the bar is so low that even a bit of competence will be better. And for me, a big part of Labour is the social aspect of like the cultural, I think, will be terrible under Labour, but the economy, I think, will actually be a lot better with Labour in government.
I think the economy could be a lot worse because our recession didn't happen in the way predicted. Our numbers were actually better than Germany and various others. Sunak did do something with inflation, or maybe say he claimed credit, but inflation has started to come down. I think it could be a lot worse if Labour spent a load of money, or I don't know. I think the economy, yeah, we're definitely in trouble. And I only grasp the economy a little bit because I'm an English major. It's not my world, but I don't really see that the economy necessarily will get any better or that Labour have any answers to it. It was interesting that Rachel Reeves was talking about being the growth party the other day. She was sounding like Margaret Thatcher. That's another interesting switch, isn't it? Labour going to be the Thatcherite growth party, while, as you say, on those other issues, closing mines and being anti-union, it could get really weird.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, that does remind me though about net zero. I didn't really think of that, because if it is 8 years, then Labour will be progressing that transition more than anyone. So yeah, having said that, it could be the case, but it could be we're more controlled, with ULEZ, LTNs, whatever it is. But so the government has more money, but we live objectively worse lives because of that, and then also all the progressive stuff. But the economy's good at the same time. Maybe.
Progressive stuff's going to be really interesting because, well, if the economy is better for some reason, they might get away with it. But if it's not, and maybe either way, people are so sick of woke. Someone just tweeted me something quite interesting, or X'd me. It's so annoying you can't say tweet, isn't it? You shouldn't have done that rebrand. But it's someone said something quite interesting to me just on X just now about how people were so sick of woke that actually it'll be interesting to see how it works for Labour. They said, because I was posting this thing from Sean Strickland, who's a really funny MMA fighter who just says what he thinks. He's been punched in the head a lot, and he just seems to have just activated like some sort of pure truth in his brain. His filter's gone, and he just says, "Dude, like when I grew up, like being trans was like a mental illness. I mean, come on, like." And some Canadian guy was like, "You voted for Trudeau. You're scum. You're the worst type of man. You're the bot." He just like, it's so funny. He goes off. He's absolutely hilarious. He's been doing loads of these videos. It's the only sport where the press conference, like football's like, yeah, we know. We've got to take each game as it comes. This guy's like, trans are mentally ill. It's a different world. But so this guy replied, he said, "Yes, woke." I said, "We may be just a few autistic people and MMA fighters away from ending woke. Because people who just tell the truth and can't help it." He wrote, a guy called Charlie Snapper, I'm going to give him credit, 34 followers, but he's right on it. He said, "Yes, wokeness seems to be on its last legs. Thank whoever. People aren't afraid to say they disagree with it and despise it anymore. It'll be interesting to see Labour get in and try to resurrect it and see how badly they get panned for it." I thought that was an interesting point, that Labour will try and be really woke, we assume, and we've heard some of their gender nonsense laws and things that look like they might be in the pipeline. But the public are so against it, and they're getting much bolder about expressing that. So isn't that going to be a really interesting tension of the Labour time? And will Labour tone down woke, or will people just get more and more angry?
I think people get more and more angry, and also there isn't an opportunity for people to express that anger, really, unless you're a political commentator. So I think that's another thing about the UK. I think the polarization of what's going to happen is going to be off the charts. You're going to have people who are anti-immigration, who want less immigration. They want, freedom in other respects, like anti all the net zero agenda stuff, kind of a new form of pro-worker, kind of the old school left, but socially right. We're just old left, really. And then you're going to have the opposite, which will be pro-immigration, like super anti-free speech, just so progressive, and like they will think that the other side's Satan, and our side, I disagree with a lot of what you say, but I would say it's our side will think the other side is just completely lost it. And like we're just seeing it more and more, how much hatred there is for people who disagree. I've never seen it just this extent of like actual hatred. It's only going to increase under Labour, because people who are anti-immigration now are going to be fuming under Labour, and the disenfranchise of those people is going to just be, I can't even picture how polarised it's going to get, really.
Good point. But yeah, because we hear about where small boats must stop. Like Keir Starmer says something vague about small boats, but what is his anti-immigration policy? What is his legal immigration policy? I don't know it, and I follow this stuff for a living, so I've got no idea. Your other point is good. Polarization. That is what's happened in Europe. The headline is always Wilders far right, AFD far right. The actual reality is both sides, both extremes are doing well. It's the centre ground that's falling apart, or the so-called centre, if you believe. Dominic Cummings doesn't believe it. There's such a thing, but what gets pushed to us as a centre, which is a kind of neoliberal globalist agenda, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever you want to call it, that kind of thing. But yeah, apparently the real takeaway from Europe is that both sides are doing well, but there's no middle, and we're a little bit behind there. But maybe that's where it goes. Our system does mitigate against that, doesn't it? With first past the post. But you just think we end up with ultra progressive. It's funny that you say progressive means really anti-free speech, which of course it does, but it's just funny that those two words go together, or terms. But so you think we end up with Labour being ultra woke, ultra progressive, and this is disenfranchised rest of the people looking for a party perhaps going to reform.
And I think that it will only result in a way more extreme reverse, like socially as well. The social aspect of politics is really going to come into play, because the madness of everything, when, like, for me, a big social aspect is what's happening with young people and hookup culture. I think that's really devastating a lot. We're having record abortions, people not getting married, people not having kids. Those three things are just the pinnacles of aggressive society, and there's going to be a massive reaction to that. And because it can't go on. Like, people are getting angry that they're seeing a generation living in complete, like, cultural filth almost. That's quite a radical thing to say, but I would say that I see it more and more. It, like, people, like, relationships, I would say, is like 30% of someone's life, you could say. And when that in the UK has fallen off a cliff of what is wholesome and what is good, then that's going to cause a lot of polarization for people who think that is bad.
So much interesting there. It's weird, like, this podcast is only just getting going, but we've already done over an hour. But a few things there. It could get very extreme, but there's always something about English people, although the country's like barely English anymore, you could argue. So there is something about this country that has been traditionally moderate. Maybe we are losing that as we become an unrecognizable country, but we've been moderate, so we're never that extreme. And some of these themes have always been there. The immigration thing, is, in terms of numbers, has gone out of control. But even in the time of Enoch Powell, there was like a documentary where the people on the streets agreed with him, but the political establishment found him reprehensible and got rid of him, destroyed him. So there's always been that. There's that tension's been there for a long time.
I wouldn't say Enoch Powell's a good guy to kind of...
No, but he's a very good example of the fact that where the British public was always more, if you want to use the word extreme, it was always far more anti-immigration than the political establishment allowed for. So the people basically agreed with Powell. They might not have agreed with his exact terminology, but they basically agreed with him, whereas the political establishment was like, oh no, this is terrible. And that's never really changed. Yeah, ask the average British person, they never want loads of immigration, most of them. And they also want things like the death penalty. But do we have the death penalty? No. But a majority want the death penalty for serial murders, child murders, and terrorist murders. But do we have it? No, we don't. So we have loads of things where the average British person is way more, he's all over the map. I mean, he wants a strong NHS, death penalty. I was joking with Lawrence about that on his show. Like, he wants to, like, save people, then kill them, or whatever it is. You know, kill them, then save. It's confusing, but it's like strong NHS, strong death penalty, anti-immigration, you know, nationalize the railways or something. It's like a weird mix of policies the average person wants, because they don't think ideologically, they just think pragmatically, a lot of people. So there is that. So will that not stop us being extreme, though, that we're just, even though some English people, some of us may have views that are considered extreme, won't somehow our politics just kind of stop that, as it always has?
Well, I think
largely has.
If it gets to a certain point, I don't think people will just go on the other end. Like, you're seeing that with religious freedoms, I think, in Europe. Like, Geert Wilder, who I would say is I would say he's a racist, the stuff he says. I've listened to what he said, some of the policy stuff he's came out with. People called him far right, and that is a right adjective of him. If he's not far right, what is far right? I don't know what ideology you think far right. Do you think the Nazis are far right enough? I don't know. But I'm not saying Geert Wilder's a Nazi.
No. When you hear him going like, yeah, we'll destroy all mosques and blah blah whatever. Sometimes some of Wilder's things you hear, you go, okay, that is quite extreme. But he's toned some of them down now that he's got in, or has he got in? He looked like he was.
They haven't formed a government. I mean, that's the other issue with those type of systems. It's so gridlocked. You have to do coalitions, and it's But I think, I think we're going to see if it carries on, we're going to see a kind of Europe style far right, really extreme, because even moderate people, like I speak to my parents, I speak to older people who are, a few years ago, they'd be like kind of massive lefties, progressive people, and now coming out and they see what's happened with certain things like, abortion or free speech or gender or hookup culture or any of these kind of pillars that we'll take for granted. They're seeing them completely destroyed. And even these people will they're classified as far right now, but once it will make them more extreme seeing all that stuff. Like, it makes me more extreme seeing young people with no sense of community or something above themselves. Again, as I said at the start, that rapid consumerism, individualism that's wrecking this kind of soul of Britain, I would say. And when we see in like 10, 20, 30 years, we see people not married, not having kids, no national pride at all, what is the UK going to look like but just a wasteland, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of people have definitely become radicalized by what's happened, but they're not really radicalized. They're just the same. I mean, a couple of things. This point about us becoming extreme, we've never had communism and fascism. We're far too sensible. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it takes to make the British people push to being more extreme. But we are very different from Europe in that we've never had those systems. So that's one thing, but we are changing a lot. Second thing, your other point about moderates and parents and so on becoming more. Yeah, my parents didn't understand what I was on about when I was talking about a lot of this woke stuff in comedy. They thought I was exaggerating. They didn't know what I was talking about. Then they saw it trickle down and enter their world, enter the world. My mum's like, hang on, you can't be a woman anymore. She's like, what's this? Because she hates all that. And, so the normal Middle England person becomes very, my mum would say Middle England's an insult, but I don't think it is. They become seemingly radical against the madness of that. Yeah. And the other thing you're saying about the hookup culture and all that, it's annoying for me because I'm just getting some success and I could maybe I could soon benefit from hookup culture just as it ends. That would be so annoying. And just as we end up in a new Taliban, because I talked about this with Ed Dutton, he's apparently controversial, but who isn't, he was predicting it could go very puritanical. It's fascinating. We're so woke. We could turn very, very puritanical suddenly. And you do see it with some of the young people and some of the social stuff. Some people are really puritanical. There is a side of the right. They're arguing about a calendar in America. They're arguing about a girl baking a cake with a tight t-shirt. You can see how it could get very sort of, especially in the US, very puritanical very suddenly. And we could go back to something. I was watching this movie. I told Ed, I was watching this movie, Ride with the Devil, and you weren't seeing it because you're a Zoomer. It was a great movie about the American Civil War by Ang Lee, and based on a novel. And anyway, there's a moment where the guy's there. He's in the house. His friend gets killed in the war, so then he goes out with then he has a child with the. Oh no, sorry. So she's about to have the friend's child, but the friend has died. Then he's kind of hanging around the house. So she's got this random child. That can't be accepted. So one day the father goes out, fetches home a priest, and he's like, "You're getting married today, or you're getting out of my house." It's in the South in America. So the point is, like, he can't have you just loitering around the house with a baby and this woman, so you're going to have to marry her. So even though it's not even his baby, but people think it is. So we could very quickly go back to, because remember, my granddad's generation, my granddad was like full of shame his entire life because his father was kind of like left or wasn't known or something. This was a big problem and a big scandal. So that we could go back. Do you think we'll go back to things like that, like scandals over like illegitimate children?
Well, not anytime soon. I think there will be that rebellion, but I think that could easily be 50 years. I think we got a long way to go within that. And I'm reading an amazing book right now. I recommend, if anyone's listening right now, religious or not, read this book. It's called God, Sex and Generation X. And it's all about the lost wonder that the West has encompassed about, from anything from pornography to intimacy, of how, because we haven't kept it sacred, people are now craving intimacy more than ever. And that's why we're hopping to extremes. And there is no intimacy. All people want right now is intimacy. Like, it's more intimate to look someone in the eyes and kiss them than have sex with them. That's where we're at, because the wonder of sex has gone. There's no awe, there's no discovery, there's no saving yourself waiting. It's just extreme. You want to like choke them or what, or like you know, or like you look at stuff that goes on in porn with like, I don't know, just really extreme stuff, and that is because there's a loss of wonder. There's not real intimacy. Real intimacy has died, and now we're just seeing kind of the fall of Rome.
Kissing is the new shagging. Who knew? That's really interesting though. So that's by Mike Starkey. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, really good. It's really short as well. Super short.
So did Generation X ruin everything? Because they were the generation just before me. Did they ruin it all?
Yeah, so it's interesting because in the book he speaks about
great films though. Carry on.
Because he speaks about that in the book, about like obviously an older generation, and the stuff he says for me growing up is moderate, and he's acting like that's terrible. So if he wrote an updated one, that would be with OnlyFans, right, the way people dress, it'd be beyond abhorrent. And I think that's like and that's how sexualized our culture is. It's just grim. And I think like it would be nice to go back to traditionalism, like where people were treated like people, even platonic relationships. Like that's another interesting thing they cover in the book, about how male and female friends can learn a lot from each other. But nowadays, you know, the average man, if the woman called them up saying, "Would you sleep with me?" they'd say yes, because that's where we're at in society. There's no, people aren't treated like people anymore. It's just because everyone's craving intimacy. Yeah.
Become transactional. Well, what's ironic about that though is that you're talking about sexual culture, but actually young people aren't having sex. There's statistics on this. No one's having sex. The other thing is, I was listening to something the other day. One of the large reasons for it is they're not drinking. You're sort of talking about degeneracy and all this, but the weird thing is young people are not drinking, so they're not hooking up. So you've got all these stats about no one's doing anything, and these incredible stats about majority of young people, those people just not having any sex. So there's also that, which is weird. What's really happening is it's a small percentage are, and most people are just not doing anything and just completely isolated. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, well, I do agree with that. It's because, like, I agree with that in the sense that people going up to meet people. So if someone's walking past, you think they're beautiful, whatever, and you catch eyes. No young person these days going up to them saying, you know, I want to talk to you, I need to get to know you, which they should be. That should be a way of or like at the pub.
I think they'll go to prison just for that, and they might.
Yeah, and that, but like also, you know, just normal interactions, and I agree with that. But the people who are going out clubbing, they're getting obliterated in many ways. Like, and I do agree with you in the sense, but that's to do with also I'd say to pornography, which has reduced people's kind of wants or needs to go out, because when you can see, you know, a beautiful woman on your phone, the need to do that. And then also, I think that if people could, and there was less anxiety, or everything was less sexualized, people would hook up. But people are hooking up. So like if you look at body counts, by the time people get to 30, or even when you look at the stats of when people were virgins till marriage, that's just fallen off a cliff. Like that's crazy if you hear about that, when that used to be more normal. So even if people are having sex in the short term, overall I'm sure their body counts are higher. It's just less often overall.
Yeah, interesting. Pearl's always on about that. Where are the virgins? It kind of gets a bit weird, but plus women are all mental now, and they can't cook. So I'd chuck that in. I was just thinking throughout that. I wish I was as clued up as Rory when I was 20. I mean, how impressive is Rory's knowledge, everyone? I think it's so impressive that I can't believe you're 20 sometimes. The amount of how engaged you are with politics and the amount of stuff you know, it is incredible.
We'll go that
last
far.
Question. Huh? No, it is incredible. I must have been smart when I was 20, because I always was. But you know, I wasn't doing anything. I didn't know anything. But one last question then. Total curveball we've missed. How long we've done? We've done a long time. So let me just quickly ask this: what is going to happen with Trump? Oh. Man, he just destroyed Iowa, and he won 51%. Destroyed DeSantis. Destroyed Haley. Trump's back. He never really went away. Everyone else is falling apart. Democrats have no decent candidate. Of course, they can always rig the election. So what's going to happen with Trump and America 2024?
Well, not to be, I know all your listeners will disagree with this, and I'm no Biden lover, but I would say Trump will get in and it'll be the end of US democracy.
What?
Yeah.
Because what? How does that? How is Trump? You're one of these people that thinks Trump is the end of democracy.
I generally do, because
one. Oh no, you've lost us right at the end. I take back all my praise of Roy. I'm taking it all back.
Well, he recently refused to sign a document that all presidents sign or people run in that shows you won't overthrow the government. He didn't sign that. He said that on day one he would do like martial law or something. He's
That was a joke.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
No,
Corey,
I
don't
mean,
fall for the mainstream media. He was on Sean Hannity. It was a live event. He goes, oh, they're worried you're going to be a dictator. And Trump went, only on day one. He's going crazy. Only day one. And we'll drill and we'll close the border. It's like, drill, baby, drill. It's like, what he's saying, we'll drill and we'll close the border on day one. That's not serious.
yeah,
Come on.
no, but I'm sorry, like it right. So this is the way it's gonna play out. If he loses the primary, he's gonna say it's rigged, and then there'll be some crazy shit that will go on the Republicans. Or
Well, it must be rigged if he lost the primary because he's absolutely destroying everyone. So if he did use the primary, it would have to be rigged.
Yeah, but he'll still, no matter what happens, he'll say it's rigged and people believe it. So, we had
How did he win
62
so big in Iowa?
court cases. He lost every single, like, they've been laughed out of courtrooms on any of the.
No, but my point is he won Iowa so big, he's going to win the primary. So if he didn't, something weird has happened.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that in the sense, like, he will, be the candidate. But the big thing that right now is shooting Joe Biden in the foot is, like, Gaza. Like, he's just losing black votes, Latino votes, Muslims, young people. Like, all he needs to do is just say he wants a ceasefire, stop the funding for a little bit, and then he'll gain them back. But until he does that, Trump is just eating those votes up, really.
No, but then he loses all the pro-Israel people, and America. Trump was the only one that put the embassy in Jerusalem, but America's very pro-Israel generally, so he loses all sorts of people and probably all sorts of money as well. If we're honest, if he suddenly says he's like anti-Israel, I know he says little things that hint that he is, but if he went that hard again, I think it would be a big problem for him.
No, but saying he wants a ceasefire, or if he said to Israel, you need to.
He already has the far left people, so he doesn't really need to say the thing you're saying.
No, but
he already has all that.
He does because, like, until there's a warning to Israel, like, stop or we'll stop funding you, then they won't stop, and young people know that, and that's why they're losing the vote. Like, all that, like, there's people from those countries or relatives, like, and young people especially, he's losing the vote. I think Trump, from a recent poll, might even be more popular with young people than Biden. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, the other big thing is the black vote, isn't it? And whether they always vote ridiculously 90-something% Democrat, but if any chunk of them come across to Trump, which there is talk of, at the moment Biden would get hammered if it was a fair election. But I'm amazed you buy into all the nonsense about Trump. What's obviously happened is they're against this guy. They want to stop him at all costs. They come up with nonsense charges. This is so clear. Rachel Maddow the other day on MSNBC said we're not even going to show some of this candidate's speech because there will probably be full of lies. She basically said we're not even going to show Trump's speech in case there's untruths in it. It was such disgusting censorship. Surely you recognize what's going on there. They're doing everything they can to stop Trump. They don't by any means because they know he's going to win. That's what's happening. Well, I don't see any other argument.
Well, no, I do understand why people think that, and I'm not someone who hates Trump because I understand why people voted for him before in 2016. I understand what he represents, kind of a populist, anti-establishment figure. But when you look at, so even the charges, there's not one conservative has gone through the individual charges he's been charged with and actually debunked them, because no one can. They would just say they're politicized. If you actually look at the charges, the evidence for the charges, like, he's already been found guilty of fraud. So when people say it's politicized, that's a phrase, but nobody would actually go for the charges. That's why Trump himself can barely find a single lawyer to go to actually defend him, because they're so insane. They know he'll be guilty. There was actually his own lawyer recently actually said on TV, I mean, this is insane. He said if Trump murdered someone, he would have immunity because he was president. This is the caliber of, like, legal defense Trump has because he can't find anyone to.
Yeah, and what you're missing there, of course, is that even if the charges are legitimate in the sense that if you apply the letter of the law, they could be legitimate. What you're missing, the politicization is not that. It's that all presidents do stuff. A guy had nuclear code in his trousers or something. There was a guy that went out with something in his trousers. Biden had various things. Obama had various things. The point is not that you can't find an individual charge in the law that Trump may have done. The point is you've never applied this rigor to any other president. If you did, there's always you find the crime to fit the person, etc. That's more the argument I've heard. You can always be a literal-minded person and say, well, look at all these charges. And then we can start going through what Biden's done and, the ridiculous life he's had. The point is, it's politicized to try and attack the president to that degree, to try and find all these charges on him. And you could potentially have done it with any president. I think that's more the argument I've heard.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that Biden shouldn't be charged. I'm not saying Clinton should be charged. I'm saying they should all be charged and locked up if they've done.
Yeah, I've heard Josh say that on headlines, but it's just not realistic. It's just nonsense because it's not going to happen.
So your argument there is the reason we should ignore these charges is because other people have also committed crimes. I don't agree with that logic, really.
Well, the logic is it's the real world. The way the law is now, you can pretty much get someone on anything. Anyone's committed some sort of tiny infraction. We see this all the time. The argument is that it is completely politicized, and then the counter argument is always, well, then they should do it for Biden, but for well they're not going to, because the Department of Justice and all these other these intelligence agencies are all weaponized again for one side. So if they really were going to start doing it for all of them, then maybe we could talk, but they're not going to because they're politicized. So politicized now means, if you look at what they've done to Tate, for an example, that is a pretty flimsy case. It's not really going anywhere. You can find stuff on people if you want, and if you can't, you cripple them with the process. You cripple them with legal costs. I mean, look at like the postmaster scandal. People thought they were guilty. You'd have been saying at the time, well, look at that. It looks like the postmasters are guilty, but of course they're not over time. But you can find something. The legal system is so complicated now. The law is so complicated. It always seems to me at this point, you can find something on anyone, and it becomes a question of who's got the best lawyers and who's prepared to spend the money and go through the time. It's just not. And the other point is, it's only going one way. So this didn't happen to Clinton. This didn't happen to Biden, and it wouldn't, and it's not going to. There's a chance it may now if Trump can somehow win power in this corrupt system, and then could start persecuting people. It probably would happen now because they've created this precedent. So where it's going to be all out war and all out lawfare, which is a terrible precedent to create. It's just not really. You're doing what Josh did on headlines. It's kind of deliberate. It's kind of being obtuse or being too literal-minded. It's just not. We know that it's. Would you disagree it's politicized? You'd have to be absolutely insane to disagree. The attacks on Trump are politicized, and they want to do everything they can. So then, would you disagree with that for a start? Is there a political motivation, or is it just, this man has done these infractions, we better check them out?
So I mean, right. So for a start, the notion that Trump has had everyone found guilty of something, he's done a few bad things. Trump has dodged many of the charges he's charged with endless times. I mean, if you look at the documents, he was told repeatedly to give the documents back, and he didn't. And then when they stormed it, it was like, oh my goodness, isn't this insane? It's politicized. But what people don't know is they repeatedly asked them. They were unbelievably lenient with him. He's had endless corruption. Trump University, I think he got accused of raping someone. Not only allegedly the other day. He's multiple felonies.
Has any billionaire not been there? I mean, every single footballer's been accused of rape.
He was best friends of Epstein. He's had so many.
He wasn't best friends of Epstein. He didn't even like Epstein. He said that he was a bad guy.
We know
Clinton was on the actual plane.
Trump said this, right? Trump said this about Epstein. He says,
you've got Trump derangement syndrome.
He called him. I think he said he's a terrific guy, and he especially loves young, beautiful women. So he definitely knew he was a nonce if he said. And he likes young, beautiful women.
If you don't see what that is, that's a way of deliberately saying something to that's getting a little dig in by saying he's terrific. But the other day he said but I don't be too harsh on Biden, but he's the worst president we've ever had in our history. So that's a classic Trump line.
I think, no, because
you struggle to discern humor. A lot of people who are anti-Trump have no sense of humor and they can't understand. That's terrific guy, he likes young women. That's the little Trump dig. That's what that is. And anyway, if we're going to play the Epstein card, I mean, Bill Clinton was on the bloody plane.
But I'm not defending Bill Clinton, but it seems like whenever I talk about Trump or anything to do with Trump, your argument then is, well, Biden or Clinton. But I don't like any of the people you bring up either.
Because there's only two parties. And in your world will never happen, which is that everyone's suddenly perfect who gets to the role of president. This just won't happen. So it's an irrelevant argument. I'm talking about the real world. You're talking about I want a president who's never done anything wrong. Okay, but it doesn't exist. It's never going to happen. So it's pointless to even raise. And it's disingenuous because you attack my point, positing an illusory utopia that will never happen against me. So how can I compete with that? Of course I can't. Whereas I posit actual reality. Would this happen to a Democrat? No. Okay, so it's politicized. Good.
So,
The documents. Here's another point. The document. Who cares? Trump did something with documents. Does a Trump voter care, or do they care more about the state of the country? Do they care more about the targeting of Trump, who everyone must admit has been targeted by media? And even if you claim somehow he's not being targeted by the law, he's been targeted very brutally. Do they care if he didn't give a document back? I don't give a fuck. So if I was voting in America, I'd be like, oh, he didn't give the document back. So what? What I care far more about is why are they pursuing him so relentlessly, trying to knock a candidate out of the race, utilizing the law, utilizing the Department of Justice and so on. That worries me far more than he didn't get the document back. So I don't even care. So what do you say to that?
So, right, my question to you is, do you think he should be dropped of all 92 charges? Like,
yeah.
So you think the felonies, the fraud, all these horrendous charges that he would be found guilty of, definitely. You think every single one has zero, it's all politicized, just all of it, just completely made up?
Correct. Yes.
So, I mean, but based on his history, can you really, I mean, he got caught endless scams if you look at his career, and you think all these charges, every single one of these charges that could potentially create civil war in America, you think they're just all made up? They're just all complete.
They won't create civil war. They won't. Well, they like I said, they may legally have some legitimacy, but I don't care about them. Is what I'm saying. What's going to cause civil war is putting Trump in prison or stopping Trump from running. That's what's going to cause civil war, not whether he got back a document and gets away with it, which no one gives a shit about.
I mean, I think political leaders should be held equally accountable. I don't think there should be, just because bad.
Okay, now given that they're not going to be, and that the Democrats own all the intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice, all that, etc. Given that, what then? Given that your fantasy is not going to happen, what then?
Right, I got a question for you. If Trump murdered someone, do you think he should be held accountable for that?
You're answering my question with a question. Like, given that the Democrats are not going to be held equally accountable, what then?
Well, I think they should.
And obviously, if Trump murdered someone, that would be different, is my answer.
But you're pushing a view that the justice system's completely fabricated, which I disagree.
Not fabricated. It's completely partisan.
I disagree.
At this point, all aspects of it are partisan, and they're being utilized against Trump. And everyone knows that. You think you would get, like, if you're an American citizen, you'd suddenly get those 92 charges or whatever it is? No, you wouldn't, because no one cares, because you're not the president. Or you're not
because I haven't done the night. I haven't scammed, rigged, like, paid off people, corruption. I haven't broke law repeatedly, got warned about it, and then like.
Because I'm trying to keep you in the real world where you refuse to live.
Right.
Corruption, you mentioned that. Who is more corrupt than the Biden family? Joe Biden, the big guy, Hunter Biden, the laptop, the deal with China and the Ukraine thing, all incredibly corrupt. We know this. So your choice now in the next election is between Biden, who we know is incredibly corrupt, and Trump, who you're saying is corrupt. So which one is it? Which one is it then?
I would pick Biden just because there's less charges that
he's way more corrupt.
No, but the only reason he's not
is the media suppressing it for you. The media is suppressing it, and so you're buying into it, which is really weird.
Right, my question.
They suppressed the laptop story.
Yeah, I agree.
Prior to the election, because they knew that it would affect Biden. So he's so corrupt, and it's actually being suppressed by Facebook and by the media and so on. We know this is established. But you want this ultra corrupt Biden, who's senile as well, and who has presided over Afghanistan withdrawal. Suddenly war in Russia and Ukraine, war in the Middle East, but basically this thing in Yemen. I mean, the world is far more unstable. When Trump was in, no wars. That's empirically true. But you want wars, chaos, senile idiot, a corrupt senile idiot, because you've got Trump derangement syndrome.
I don't want him. I wouldn't vote for him. I'd vote for, like, I don't know who. No, my question for you is, right, let's say it was found out.
You want corrupt Biden instead of corrupt Trump. By your own terms, they're both corrupt.
Yeah,
so why do you want the corrupt?
Trump's more corrupt, but they're both corrupt.
That's ludicrous. Biden's way more corrupt, but that's just a debate.
He doesn't have 92 criminal charges, already been found guilty of one. Right, my question though.
We don't know about the stuff Biden's done because the media suppresses it, but we know he's involved in really dodgy stuff with his son. With
I don't disagree, but that doesn't take away from Trump's corruption. The alternative to me saying Trump's
so you want corrupt Biden because you don't like Trump.
I don't want corrupt Biden. Right, my question to you is, if there's a video of Trump.
So weird because you're anti-woke. He's the most woke president in history.
I don't like Biden. I don't like Biden.
His administration. Yeah, but those are your choices. You're in a fantasy world where you've got this other.
But if I
Those are
had
the
to
choices.
pick, I'd pick that. But I wouldn't vote for Biden at all otherwise. Like if I was gun to my head, I had to pick. But my question to you is, as I
Who would you
said,
vote for?
I don't think I'll probably spoil my ballot. I think, to be honest.
Oh, ballot. Well, what the fuck's that gonna do? They spoil the ballot and you get communists again. I mean, fucking hell. We've got to sort these young people out spoiling ballots.
But no, but
This
you
is how we
got
get
to answer
Biden.
the question.
You're the
Like,
problem.
you got to answer the question
Oh,
about quickly, like
yeah.
if they found out Trump killed someone definitively, and Trump even admitted it,
I already answered it. You missed me. I already answered it. I said, of course, that would be different.
right? So you would agree that he should be prosecuted if he killed someone?
If he murders someone, yes.
Yeah.
But these are what he did was administrative.
No, but I'm just
So
checking.
he didn't send back the documents. And like I say, we know Clinton did similar things. We know Biden did similar things. So
Yeah.
all presidents do stupid stuff with documents. If he killed someone, of course, it's
I mean, I'm just checking because
we don't know how many people Biden's killed. We don't know how many people Hillary's killed. We better not even say that because I'll probably get in trouble.
Yeah.
But
all right.
but if Trump killed someone, of course it'd be different.
All right.
Trump did say once he's so popular he could murder someone on the street and it wouldn't do
I
anything.
mean, he's true. He's right. He's completely true. Because people don't
course,
care
that'd be completely
about what he does. They don't care the corruption. They don't care if he gets accused of this. He gets charged of this. They don't care. So
They don't at this point because they see what it is. But I think Trump's remarkably clean for someone who absolutely everyone's gunning for. The entire US media, the entire world media, the entire Department of Justice, the entire CIA and FBI, everyone is gunning for him. And they find such rubbish. I'm like, Trump must be the cleanest guy. How many billionaires with everyone in the world is gunning for them and they're a billionaire and they've come up in New York are this clean. It's unbelievable. And you see that guy the other day, the mafia guy saying we tried to work with Trump and he just told us to get out of the room and we didn't even try it. No, he must be the cleanest guy on earth.
You're the only person on planet Earth who thinks Trump is the clean. He is the most
loads of people think this.
One of the most corrupt, like billionaires or whatever.
Trump is the least corrupt, clean person probably on earth.
Nobody thinks that.
Because to look in it, because he has so many people. Everyone thinks that. There's so many people against him, and yet he's still come out with nothing. You've lost our entire audience, Roy. They'll agree with me.
Yeah.
You've alienated
any lawyer, any legal justice person ever would just not agree with you on that. Like, it's just factually incorrect. Like, Trump University, building the wall. I mean, just two right there, just complete scams.
Building the wall is a failed policy more than a corrupt thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but he raised him and what's his name? Steve Bannon raised money to build a wall. They brought private money. I mean, then they just end up stealing.
No one's motivated to take you down. But imagine you had, and you're only 20, and you're not a billionaire, and you haven't come up in New York. But imagine you had the EU, the UN, like the Clintons, the Department of Justice, the FBI. Imagine you had all these against you. Putin, you had like so many people trying to destroy you, and all they could find is some bollocks about documents. I mean,
it's not just bollocks about documents. I don't think you see the other charges. The other charges are attempted insurrection, ballot. There's
now you make yourself sound ridiculous. Attempted insurrection.
No,
You're
not
contempt media.
Not contempted insurrection. I did make myself look stupid there. I'm trying to. What's the thing where the ballot scheme? What was it called?
Ballot harvesting?
No, not ballot harvesting. Fake elector scheme. That's it. Fake elector scheme. Like where he tried to literally in multiple states. Like, I mean, yeah, you should look into it. It's beyond corrupt.
I shouldn't have asked the Trump question because, one, we were set to do about an hour. Now we've gone way over, and two, it just gets too controversial, and three, because you've also made yourself look foolish with our audience. But
everyone hates
they might, or some will think I have, but not probably on this podcast.
Yeah.
I don't think everyone who listens to this will be a big Trump fan necessarily. Won't be Biden fans though, but they might not like Trump. They might like DeSantis or Vivek, or they might have some other view. I mean, libertarians don't like Trump. He's not a libertarian, but well, it kicked off with the Trump bit. Overall, I thought it was good though. We talked about loads of interesting stuff, and it got going as it went on. Maybe we'll do more of these, talking about especially the DEI bit and your thoughts about the culture getting too degenerate. Maybe we'll leave out Trump. But where can people find you, Rory?
Well, first of all, thanks for letting me come on. Always love your audience, amazing bunch. Even though I'm sure they hate me by the end, they probably love me at the start, and then towards the end, just more. All the anti-Trump, and then Israel. I'm sure by the end they hate me to bits. But you can catch me at the Radical English Gentleman podcast every Thursday at 6 o'clock. We do news and culture, get people on, real conversation, real issues, and real chat. But it's been a pleasure coming on again.
And everyone hates you, Roy, because you have so many sort of contrary views that you end up sort of, no one hates you as a person, but your views, you always tell me you end up being hated because you just have such a strange collection of views, right?
Yeah, that's what happens because I don't fit in a box of my opinion. I'm kind of, people will like me for a few minutes and they'll be like, hang on, what the fuck's this view? Because I try so, like, my whole goal of me is I don't fit any box, and I never try to go with the crowd on anything in my life. I always try to do the opposite of what people kind of...
Well, I don't do the opposite, but you won't believe this, but I try to just take every issue at face value, and I don't believe either that I have a set, I don't take my views from like a set pie. People will say like I'm a conservative or something. I've never voted Tory ever, so it's like, or they'll, I like to think I do the same. Maybe I come out more on one aligned with one side than you do. But all right, very interesting. If you want to support this podcast, and we'll probably put out most of this, maybe we'll edit some of it. No, it's quite long, isn't it? We're doing a lot of work. If you want to support this podcast, go to buymeacoffee.com/Nick Dixon. You can leave a donation there, or nickdixon.substack.com, where I'm starting to write a lot more articles this year, so you'll get value for money there. It's £5 a month. nickdixon.substack.com. Or buymeacoffee.com/Nick Dixon. For a one-off donation, you can support the current thing, so to speak. You can support my other podcast, The Weekly Skeptic, support me in general, and it is much appreciated. And that is pretty much it. But thanks for it. We'll be back next week.